Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. Thanks so much for joining us today for another episode. First and foremost, I am feeling so excited about this new community series that we're hosting every Thursday. We're getting so many emails in with honestly just such deep and thoughtful questions. And it's really awesome to see that our community's out there listening and thinking and seeing how the things that we talk about apply to their life. Because ultimately, I think this series is really going to showcase that we really all do go through a lot of the same stuff in this life, whether we're talking about figuring out our friendships or figuring out imposter syndrome or figuring out who we really are. So many of these concepts overlap, and we see that through the community series, through the questions that come in, and we get to work through them and share with our community, which I think can be really helpful to everyone who's listening. So thank you so much to everyone who has wrote to us via email or who has DM'd us. So if you haven't listened yet, we released our first episode of the series last Thursday. This is all about friendships, figuring out navigating friendships, and keep a lookout for this Thursday for our second episode of the series.
That's right. We've really been enjoying getting these questions in. So we thank all of you for writing such detailed questions to us and trusting your questions with us. We really appreciate and get really excited when we hear from all of you. And we're excited to continue this every Thursday. So tune in this coming Thursday to see our most recent question answered from our listener. Okay, everyone, so let's jump into our topic today. So what we want to talk about today is really at the core of everything that we talk about. It's at the core of our lives personally, individually, collectively. It's something that we have really had to lean into, not only in our individual lives, but also within our relationship. It's something that if I never learned how to give myself self-compassion, I certainly wouldn't be the person that I am today. And something that we want to go into, and I know Sophie has some questions for me, but it's this idea of our triggers and the way to stop getting triggered or the way to end getting triggered is by giving yourself compassion. Because when you get triggered by something, whether that be a loud noise or it be the way something is said by someone or a topic that is said by someone, it might bring up rage in your body and you might want to have a reaction to get mad or to throw something or to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. So I think for me, this has been a really close to home topic because when you get in a relationship, everyone, you know that you have to learn to work through triggers in a way that's going to allow you to stay in a relationship. And everything can trigger you, especially when you're living with someone. So this is something that I've had to learn. I've had to learn to give myself self-compassion in order to work through triggers. And if you looked at my life today compared to 2 years ago and the way that I handle things, I'm not reactionary. I used to be very reactionary. Not to say that I'm not sometimes reactionary. We're not all perfect. No one's perfect. But I think at the core, when we're triggered, it's because at some point in our life, someone hurt us. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what happened. What matters is that you're still carrying that sort of pain within yourself. It's your responsibility to give yourself love around whatever that may be, to heal whatever may be triggering you, right? It's to change your relationship. It's to change your perspective. It's to change the way that you view something and to hold out and to just feel that pain that the trigger causes you, right? There's so much to be said here, but that's just to give a little bit of an introduction on this topic. I think it's something that is probably widely felt across everyone. I don't know if I'm biased because I feel like it's taken up a large portion of my life as something I've had to work through, but it's something that I'm excited to go deeper with all of you on.
Great intro. I think definitely it is something that takes form and shape in all of our lives. I think we may not realize it because there's so many different ways that you can get triggered. And I feel like I've seen your triggers very specific to, for example, noises or things that may cause you to go into a state or fight or flight. But for me, triggers are more like I used to get triggered when I'd see somebody else succeeding. I used to get triggered when I would see somebody else doing something I wanted to do. So I think every emotion kind of is coded through different reactions. And I think a lot of time it's hard for us to understand the reason that you're responding that way, the reason why you're feeling jealous, the reason why you're feeling frustrated, the reason why you're feeling so mad at your partner, feeling so frustrated by your friend or your family, is because we are all carrying around a level of pain and a level of hurt and a level of frustration and anger. And I think when we think about how life is inherently traumatic, right? We go through so much shit just being alive, and from existential to not knowing why we're here. And then on top of that, we're thrown into school, we're thrown into families, we're raised by other human beings who also don't understand how to handle the realities of this experience. Like, everybody on this earth is going through this together. And when you get rid of division, you really see that we are all experiencing the inherent confusion that comes with being alive. And what happens because of that, you end up in situations where you are hurt. Every single person is going to be hurt at some point in this life. We are constantly being hurt, right? Like, it's just it's inherent. So I think what happens is when that hurt carries with you and you keep that hurt built up, it builds up even more, and all of a sudden you're feeling so reactive to everything in your life. And I'm curious to hear from you, Daisy, because I know this is something you've worked through a lot. And I've seen it in our relationship, and it's really beautiful now because I feel like you really have worked through those triggers and things that used to trigger you. So I would just maybe my first question to you would be, what used to come up in you? Like, what did you used to feel when you were triggered?
So it's a very vague question. And I think the first thing to specify is it's not that I'm not still triggered constantly all the time. It's that I don't react to it anymore. So for example, one of my triggers is being silenced or feeling like I have no space, feeling like someone else is taking up all the space and I'm just getting smaller and smaller and they're getting bigger and bigger. So when we first started podcasting, I would feel triggered constantly with our conversations because there was two people talking in the podcast episode, you and me. It wasn't like I was on a solo podcast where I was just talking. You were also talking, but when you were talking, I would, in my mind would create this distortion of time to where I would feel like you were talking 10 times longer than I was talking because my insecurity was, oh, I have nothing to say. My trigger was you were overcompensating because I had nothing to say. My trigger was also I can't talk because you're constantly talking, and I would get really mad. And of course, this was all really distorted, but I would have like anger come up inside of me, and sometimes I would sabotage an episode. Sometimes I'd get really upset and I would like say, stop talking. Like, it was really, really bad. And that's not to say that I don't still have that come up. I don't have that come up in the podcast anymore, really. I think I really worked through that. We've podcasted enough, but it certainly still comes up in day-to-day life when talking with people who talk a lot or talk at you. I think that's kind of a big trigger. But I think what happens is if you were to slow down this process, like, it starts to feel like you are personally being attacked because maybe something happened in your life. You don't remember exactly what, but at some point for this example, you felt like you were silenced or that you had no space, and that maybe you were young, maybe you were a child, and maybe that really hurt you. Maybe that was really, really painful in the time where you were a child because it felt so extreme. Well, what happens when we don't process these things is that it stays with us and we still react as though we were a child when it was originally happening to us. And we don't understand why we're hurting other people in our life or why other people don't want to be around us because of the way we react. When in reality, we're feeling this pain, we're projecting this pain onto others, and we're perpetuating the pain that was caused to us by not stopping it and feeling it. And this is something that it's so hard. It's so difficult because it's so visceral. But I think once you realize that you have the power to control these kinds of feelings, you're much more empowered to control your reactions to these triggers that you have and to find methods to cope, to even talk about it and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, but not doing it in a reaction-based way. I think that it's something that can run really deep and it's not something to take lightly, but I think you have to, at the core, going back to self-compassion, you have to say, hey, what's going on here? Why do I feel so angry about this? Why do I feel so upset by this? What did I not get at some point in my life? What do I need to hear? How can I give that to myself? And other times you just have to sit through it. But I think oftentimes we have to soften and say, hey, it's okay that you feel this way. And I think it can be a hard step to get there. I think it can be a place that the pain feels so great that it's hard for us to really sit with it on our own, right? So I think that it's a step by step and it's doing as much as you can. not even doing as much as you can, but hey, just becoming aware of I don't have to react. And yes, that may cause me to feel a lot of pain and a lot of anger, but that's not going to last forever. The more you're able to actually sit with it, from what I've found, the more it lessens over time. And I think the fear is that we're always going to sit with it and we're always going to feel it to that same extreme level. And it's just, that's healing. That's not always going to feel that extreme. It's always going to maybe be there for a long period of time. But on another note, there may be things that I was triggered by 3 years ago that I don't even remember that I was triggered by. And I sat with that pain and I worked through it. So all of that to be said, I think that we fear feeling pain because we think that we shouldn't feel pain. But it can feel counterintuitive to allow ourselves to feel that pain that triggers us. That's also what's going to set us free, because that pain is no longer going to control us.
Yeah, you said a lot. Honestly, that was really beautiful what you said. I mean that.
Thanks.
I think that is really making me think about, we had this conversation like off the mic a few weeks ago or maybe a month ago where I was kind of saying to you, Daisy, where I was like, it's really interesting when you think about whenever you're feeling reactive by somebody else, say somebody is triggering you in whatever way that is, and you tell them to stop. You're like, stop what you're doing, or that's bothering me, or you're trying to shut down that external stimuli that's bothering you. We both kind of had this realization where like, when you're doing that, you're just trying to stop yourself from feeling the pain, which can be really confusing to understand. But like, for example, in your situation, right? I would do something that bothered you. You'd walk in, I would be doing yoga or doing something or playing music, and you would like close up, right? Because you would then view like what was happening as something that you needed to get rid of. It was disturbing you. As Michael Singer calls it, it was surfacing your disturbed energies. And what happens when our disturbed energies surface, so when you start feeling triggered and you start feeling angry, you start feeling frustrated, we want to do everything that we can to stop that thing that's causing it. So if you're in a relationship with your partner, you're going to look to your partner, you're going to say, stop. Like, can you please stop doing that? It's bothering me. And when that happens, when you keep doing that, all of a sudden what you're doing, and I think in Untethered Soul, I think Michael Singer talks a lot about this, where he's saying you start creating this very, very delicate life where nothing in your surroundings can bother you. You start curating this life that you're practically walking on eggshells because you're making everything in your external world, you're creating everything in your external world to be perfect so that it does not bother those disturbed energies within you. But all the while, you just think that you need to fix those things. Those are the problem. It's my partner, that's the problem. It's that loud noise that it's the problem. It's the fact that my computer isn't working, or that my job or my boss, that's a problem. Instead of saying, oh, wait, what is within me? What is in me? What is the pain that's in me that is making me feel so bothered by these things that inherently in the universe, on a universal level, are inherently neutral, right? A computer cannot, when your computer is breaking, right? We see this with a reaction to technology. It's like when your phone isn't working, it's like, oh, like I'm so frustrated by it. And it's like, can a phone really make you feel that way? It's like, no, there's something in you that's getting disturbed. So it's a really amazing realization when you realize that, because it's just, you start to realize that like, I don't have to change anything around me anymore. All I have to do is I ask myself, and I think, Daisy, you did this and you're doing this. It's like, what is inside of me that is getting so bothered? What is it?
Yeah, I think bringing Michael Singer into this conversation is really fitting and interesting. I think he can probably be brought into any of our conversations, his topics, philosophies, what the things he says are. But I think specifically the podcast we were listening to, where he mentioned all spirituality is emptying out your rocks, or AKA your disturbances, all the things that you try to control in your life to make your life feel okay, all the things that upset you. It's letting go of all of those, all of the pain, all of the things that really paint the picture of how our life looks on a day-to-day basis. Because if you take a step back and you look at reality as it is right now, we're going to see it differently than the person across the street's going to see it. Same as our neighbor, same as the guy down the street, same as the guy working at our apartment complex doing maintenance. We're all going to see it so differently. So I feel like what he poses is, how do you get to a place where you're able to see everything as it really is. And if not to see things as it really is, to see things in a positive way. Or maybe it's not to see things in a positive way. Maybe it is to just see things as they are. And I feel like, yes, it's that simple. Spirituality is letting go of all the pain you've ever experienced. Done, right? It's super simple. But what I think is interesting and maybe not spoken about so much is like, how do you work through that? How do you get through all of that pain, that devastating pain? How do you keep going? And this is where I think we established our podcast, right? Is we actively have been trying to work through it. And it's been a super confusing journey. And at the core of it, there it is. It's self-compassion. It has to be self-compassion, or else I feel like it's phony. You can't bypass all the pain that you felt by achieving some level of hierarchy or some certificate of meditation. Like you can't just achieve something to bypass all of the pain you've experienced as a human being. And I'm working with kids right now. I'm nannying. I see just being a human from a young age, it's hard. Everyone has some level of pain. And that's not to say, oh, life's so hard and we're so miserable. It's to say, no, these are the facts. If you want to live a life that is truly open and full of love, you got to acknowledge these things and you got to work through them and you got to fully acknowledge them so that you can move on beyond them. And I think it's super easy to say, oh, well, nothing happened to me. Nothing was bad. Nothing was painful. It's like, well, are you ever moody? Do you ever get into moods? Do you ever feel upset? Do you ever feel sad? It's like investigating in these moments. Do you ever feel really hard on yourself? I think these are the moments for us to learn. I also think it takes a lot of pressure off. You were saying that like one of the things Michael Singer was saying in the podcast you're listening to this morning was that all we have to do is focus on our internal world, right? And I think coming off of a weekend where we had visitors, where there was a lot of like external fun, there was a lot of things that we were doing. It was so fun. I loved it. But I think I also see coming into, we've recorded several times trying to do this podcast because what we do on a daily basis, we do work. We do so much reflection. We do so much awareness reflection. That's just how we operate. But I feel like the past, 5 or so days, we haven't been doing that because we've just been enjoying spending time with people we love. And I think the reality is that I haven't been reflecting the past 5 days. That doesn't mean that I haven't been working through things, but it left me coming to this podcast kind of saying like, where am I right now? Because all we're ever doing is reflecting on this podcast of the journey that we're actually on. And it made me realize like I'm feeling a little disconnected from myself, not in a necessarily a bad way, but just in a, I don't know where I'm at right now. I don't know how I'm feeling. And I think the number one way back is to have that self-compassion. I know that I've just spun around a lot and said a lot of things in this conversation so far, but I think it's just bringing it back to there's no quick fix to anything, right? It's a lifelong journey of commitment. And I think it's always bringing it back to there's no place to get. And the answer is probably, if you're feeling dissatisfied with everything, is getting still right now in this moment. And not trying to wake up early and work out and do all these things as a way to move away from what you're really feeling, right? If you're doing all those things and you're connected to yourself, that's amazing. But I know I'm someone who tends to get really busy as a way to further disconnect from myself. And that's not going to do yourself any favor. I think we have to recognize the difference between feeling excited to do things and the difference between using that as a coping mechanism, as a way to cope with being disconnected from ourselves. Because in order to connect with ourselves, we have to sit with what we're really feeling. And that's where the stillness comes in. I think that's something you mentioned, maybe not in this episode, but maybe in one of the last 5 episodes we tried to record, was stillness is something that you can always come back to as a way to get rid of those disturbances, those rocks, right? It's not just, I'm going to meditate for 30 days and then be done with it. It's, I'm going to know when it's important for me to take stillness for myself so that I can keep my mind going on the right track. It's so multifaceted, but I think that learning to do whatever it is that you're doing for yourself out of self-compassion, like that is the most important thing to do consistently, because I challenge you to be a little bit more aware of this as you go about your week and saying, am I doing this out of self-compassion or am I doing this out of something else? Because I think the more we become aware is where we're able to actually make a difference in why we're doing things. And that, I think, ultimately is going to be more important than any certain level of rigid consistency coming from the wrong place, right? I think self-compassion is always going to outperform any other metric of getting us to success, because what self-compassion equals is actual, real, sustained growth. We're not going to burn out from giving ourselves self-compassion. We're never going to burn out from that, but we're going to burn out from making ourselves get up at 5 a.m. every day because we're afraid of failing, right? I think the more we can integrate self-compassion into our lives, the more we can actually achieve those things, like waking up at 5 a.m. every day, if that's what you want, right? I think it's combining those two things and learning how to do things out of love for yourself.
You said a lot there.
I really did say a lot.
Was that like 5 minutes?
I don't know.
Well, what I was thinking about when you're talking is like, again, Michael Singer, he was talking about, so he's like, so you're going to get up in the morning and meditate, right? And then you're going to meditate in the evening. And then you have so many hours in between the morning meditation and the night meditation. And it's like, it's so funny. Like we like do things like that. Like we're like, we got to go meditate. We got to go to the yoga class. We got to journal. We got to do whatever. We got to do all these things to try to create and cultivate this sense of calm, this sense of homeostasis, this sense of relaxation. And as always, like, yes, there are tools to reach that state, but what about all those hours in between the meditation you do in the morning and the time you go to bed? What happens there? Like, and that's where, with everything you're saying right now, it's a matter of asking yourself, what are the things that get in the way of me enjoying this moment? Okay, so let's just go through a few examples. You're sitting here right now. I'm sitting here right now podcasting. I feel pretty good, but there's a little part of me that's kind of like, I don't know. Okay, so let me ask myself, what is getting in the way of me really being here right now? What are thoughts that I have or assumptions that I have? Okay, number one, perfection. Okay, I need to sound perfect for this podcast, because if I don't, then listeners aren't going to want to listen. And if they don't want to listen, then they're not going to care about what I'm thinking, and therefore our podcast will fail. That's something I probably have subconsciously deep down, right? So that is all premised on the idea that there's such a thing of being perfect. There's such a thing of creating something that's perfect. And then you see the combination of there. It's like, okay, so why do I care about perfection? Because I'm scared. Why am I scared? Because I'm scared that if things don't work out, then what? If this podcast doesn't work out, then what? What's going to happen to me? Well, something bad's going to happen, right? Because clearly I think something bad's going to happen. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting so much pressure onto it. So what's the utmost fear then? Oh, do I have to go back and become a lawyer again? Am I so deeply scared about going back to that old life of being a lawyer? Like, what are these fears that are keeping me from really, really being here right now? And those are kind of like more or maybe surface level things. I don't know if I really scratched the surface. I have so many thoughts always about fears and concerns, but
yeah, I think what you just said was really interesting, because I think what happens when we are not necessarily taking charge of our emotions constantly, kind of the work that we do for this podcast, it's easy for things to quickly add up and quickly compound if we're not taking an inventory of who's here today, emotion-wise. Who are we feeling? What are we feeling? And I think what you just said makes a point as to why sitting in stillness, even if it's the very last thing that you want to do, is something that helps you process things that are maybe making you feel meh or not good, but they're so below the surface, you don't know what they are. But once you sit in stillness, they're going to rise and you're going to feel them a little bit and you're going to be able to work through them, right? I think it's not saying, oh, I'm just going to do this every single day. I think it's becoming aware enough to know the days that, hey, I could benefit from this, help me go back on track to living a more open life, right? Or there's days where it's, I'm pretty aware of how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling really great. I don't need to bother with that today. I think it's becoming aware of how we're feeling constantly and checking in and knowing, what are we feeling? I think that's kind of the goal. We don't need to just, like you said, put those as the bookends of our day. We can have enough faith in ourselves to understand where we're at, no matter what our routine is.
We have to be aware constantly. And I think that that's something I'm realizing like recently, what is that I have to be aware constantly. Either I'm falling into my mind or I'm not. Am I aware right now of what is happening? Am I aware of the thoughts that are controlling my life in this very moment? And I feel like the past few days I have really fallen into my mind because we were doing things and I was coming back into kind of just like thinking about myself a lot and comparing myself. And I think we find it's a very delicate balance of falling back into the world, interacting with people who are so caught up with themselves. You go into society and a lot of people are really caught up thinking about themselves, and it puts you back into that place where you're thinking about yourself. And I just think it's like constantly coming back and checking in. Okay, where am I right now mentally? Where am I, to the listener? Where are you right now mentally? What is the thing that you were grasping onto, whether that's consciously or subconsciously? What is that thing you're holding onto that is keeping you from being here right now? And I just want to chime in about what I was saying earlier about that overwhelming thoughts I was having this morning. I really came to that conclusion, and I'm so glad I did, which is that I didn't have to answer all of the thoughts I was having. I did not need to have an answer in that moment to what I'm going to do for finances, or if I need to go get new shoes because my feet hurt, or if I need to go send that email. I didn't need to do that in that moment. I would do those in a timely manner. I would address them in due time. And we have to learn to cultivate an understanding that when our anxious thoughts arise, when our thoughts are telling us, you have to do this right now, you have to do this right now, that is not happening anywhere but your mind. It never is. And it's the reason we do this podcast, because even us who, and I'll say even us in the sense that we have done so much work, I have felt so much pain, I have allowed so many emotions to come in and for me to really look at them. Even this past weekend, I cried a lot at a point, really processing stuff about what's happened the past few years and stuff with my family and parents. And I felt so weird feeling sad. Like there was a moment where I was like, Daisy, I don't want to feel sad. I feel so weird feeling sad. And I remember you just kind of reminded me like, it's okay to be sad. And I think there was some point in our life where we learned it wasn't okay to feel sad. There was some point where we started to feel like we had to feel great every single day, and we had to feel happy every single day, and we have to wake up in the morning ready to go. And obviously working at certain jobs really create this false sense of that you're supposed to be on all the time, and society and consumerism in this world that we're in. And I think that's why we're so miserable, because we're constantly running away from what we're actually experiencing. We're constantly running away instead of just really coming into that feeling. Like you like melt into the feeling in a way instead of like jumping out of trying to get out of it, if that makes any sense at all.
I mean, I think what we're taught is let's get attached to things that are going to make us happy. Like, oh, how much money did I make this week? What can I go buy? What did I just order that's going to make me happy? And we follow that for as long as we can until we don't any longer feel better from these things that we're getting from life, that we're attaining, any material items that we're getting. I think instead we worship things and material items and statuses, and we've chased those things as a way to make us happy and feel fulfilled, instead of ripping off the Band-Aid and sitting with what we're really feeling, right? And I can tell you right now, like where I'm at, I feel myself at a crossroads of wanting to easily get obsessed with the idea of, okay, how much money am I making right now? Looking at my savings, getting obsessed with like these things is a way to cope. And I think if we don't check ourselves at the door each day or each week, some consistency there, what's going to happen is we're going to keep falling deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And you're right, as a time of we've done a lot of work, so we can kind of catch ourselves. But if we're not actively checking in with ourselves, it's so easy to fall into a place of we say, oh, wow, what work have I really done? Have I diverted all of my attention? Like I feel like when I first started doing work on myself, yeah, I would go to therapy, I would journal, but I wasn't really actively putting myself in to those things. I was just kind of going through the motions. And the way that I was living my life is I was still chasing the cheap thrills, meaning thinking about What kind of drink am I going to get? What kind of coffee am I going to get? What kind of weekend getaway am I going to go on? What kind of shirt am I going to get? Like minute things that occupy our mind, right? I was doing a lot of that. So I was doing a lot of fake work. I wasn't ready to go deep yet. And I think when you're ready, you're ready. Like right now, like I could see my day going one or two ways. I could just kind of settle in and kind of let go of any expectation of anything and let myself kind of just ground, to not project my insecurities or my fears onto needing to get things done because I feel behind, right? Or I could go and get a coffee before I go to nannying. I could think about, what do I want to go and buy? I don't know. I'm just thinking like, how can I distract myself? Because I'm at a place right now where I do feel disconnected from myself. And I think that's the time where we have to decide, am I going to go further away from myself, or am I going to surrender to what I'm feeling and let myself go through what I'm feeling?
Right. Am I gonna sink into this experience that I'm actually experiencing right now, or am I gonna find ways to do everything I can to run away from it?
Exactly. Am I going to feel uncomfortable? Nothing crazy, but am I gonna feel mildly uncomfortable right now for a little while to allow myself to feel the great joys and the great depth of life? Or am I going to avoid feeling any certain level of discomfort right now and perpetuate any sort of short thrill of any quick high that I can get? And am I going to allow that to funnel me further away from myself, maybe into an episode of sadness or depression, right? Those are the two options you have, I feel like, when you're faced with any certain level of discontentment.
But that's the thing, though. Those are the two options we have in every moment of every minute of his life. And I think there's a huge misconception that our minds think that, created by all the distractions we constantly have, that like there's something to do other than to be here. There's nothing to do other than to be here. And you will soon recognize that, because there are going to be constantly things that are disappointing you and frustrating you, and you're never going to feel satisfied ever. Like you just won't. So if you want to live a miserable life, sure, keep up with the distractions, keep running away from yourself. And I don't mean to sound like an asshole. I just mean to know that like I have found myself in that life, and I don't want that life for myself, because I'm seeing that there's so much more fulfillment when we make a decision to stop trying to change what's unfolding right for now. You don't have to change, whoever's listening, you don't have to change what's happening, because the moment has already happened. And what is suffering? It's when we resist what is happening. And I want to ask you, Daisy, because I feel like we briefly mentioned about triggers earlier, and I think it really all ties into this. Like this kind of what we're talking about is the answer to sitting with the things that trigger you. But I'm curious, I want to hear from you, like, what was that shift like for you of the things that were triggering you, and to then gain the recognition of, oh, the answer isn't to change the trigger. The answer is to change myself.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say it was about a year ago, and I recognized that by reacting to triggers and avoiding the pain, I was making my relationships and my life worse. I was perpetuating my own suffering and misery by further bringing this out in other people if I was the one to react. And those two things are the most important things in our life, our relationships and the mentality and what we put out, what kind of energy or attitude we put out. And I recognize that those two things were going to make for me to not be a very happy person if I continued reacting to these triggers. So it was really quite simple. I realized the risk of losing close relationships was not worth it for me to avoid the pain. And it woke me up to realize that I have to be mature, and I have to work through this. And I think from that point, it's gotten progressively easier. I think I was lucky to have a moment where I saw with great clarity, without my perspective, from an unbiased point of view, from an unhurt person, I was able to see what you're doing is not enjoyable to be around. So don't do that. You're making it painful for everyone else, or you're making it uncomfortable for everyone else. So own up to your own actions and work through them. And I think ever since that moment, I've maintained that same mentality of, I know I'm going to be able to work through this. It's kind of the same thing if you start lifting 2-pound weights. Fast forward 6 months, now you're lifting 8-pound weights. Fast forward 2 years, now you're lifting 30-pound weights. It's something that you get more confidence in, the more weight you can carry, the more you can see yourself shedding old skin and working through things, the more to a point it becomes exciting to say, what can I handle? Because you know you can handle 30 pounds. Well, how much more can I handle? If I can handle that, the amount I can handle is infinite. So let's keep going because I feel a certain level of progress now. I feel like this is something I'm invested in. So it's more of a piece of work for myself than it is for something for me to be afraid of. It's something I get to keep working at. And I think that is really encouraging. And if I heard that, I think that would make a lot of sense to me before I was able to take accountability for my triggers. Because I feel like it is something that is daunting and you feel like it's going to last a lifetime, but it's not. It's something that you get better at. You manage it and your life becomes a lot better.
And do you feel like in that recognition was a recognition that there's no one to blame but yourself?
Yeah, I think it's taking full 100% accountability for your actions, right? It's so easy to play victim. And yeah, there's things that were painful that you experienced, but do you want to keep living in that place? No. Okay. So instead of playing victim, why don't you instead move through what you're feeling and empower yourself to no longer be victim to victimhood, you know? Like, why don't you allow yourself to be free by actually taking accountability for what you're feeling? And it's no one else's responsibility. And you're the only one that's really feeling these things. So it's up to you to change it.
I think one of the hardest things to recognize on this journey is that there was a point in time where we made a decision to internalize certain beliefs. Yes, certain events might have facilitated that, something happening to you or being in certain situations or going to school somewhere or just having certain parents or whatever it is. You have the external event that happened, but there's a point in time where we decided that we were going to continue living that way. We decided and agreed that this is the belief system that we want to agree with, that we are shitty people, or that we don't think we're valuable, or we don't think we're good enough, or no one cares what we think, or that our voice doesn't matter, or that people are judging me, or that I'll never be successful, or that I am just constantly embarrassing myself, or I have to please people, or people are going to leave me. Just endless beliefs that, I like how you said, it's like you stop becoming a victim to victimhood, because inherently when you're continuing to place the blame externally, you're kind of missing that really tough. And it's tough. It's painful. I've really gone through this a lot recently of like, wow, I have made so many agreements about who I thought I was and who I thought I was in this world. And it's very painful to know that I at some point believed those things.
And the funniest thing of it all is that when you work through it, you can end those agreements whenever you want. You are the only one that is holding yourself to it. And if hearing that triggers you, then that means that you need to relax into that trigger and question it, because you don't have to be anything that anyone has ever told you you were. And by that, I mean, you don't have to be what you tell yourself you are. Because when you refer to people telling you that you are X, Y, or Z, you're likely just referring to what you're telling yourself you are. And you can end that agreement at any time, right? You have to have the willpower to let it go. And any of us can. You have to have the willingness to say, fuck that. I'm not identifying by that anymore. I'm letting that go. And look at it as a challenge. Like, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but start with something small and say, I'm not going to let that bother me anymore. That doesn't mean I'm not going to feel super uncomfortable when I experience something that's bringing this up. No, but I'm not going to respond to it. I'm not going to create thoughts around it. I'm just going to sit with it. See where that takes you, right? That might lead you to say, wow, I'm okay with this now, and lead you on to the next thing. What is that next thing? It becomes a challenge. It becomes an exciting challenge that you know you can handle.
And the fun part about this journey is that, yes, things are going to start making you feel really uncomfortable and things are going to start arising and you just feel so awful. But every time an emotion arises, just like Michael Singer says, you're just becoming aware of the rocks that are within you. And it's giving you another chance for growth. It's giving you another chance to say, oh, this is still inside of me. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to see this for what it is and make the decision to not bring this forward. And that's the beauty of this process, is remembering that when we choose to sit with how we're feeling and we look at those rocks, we look at those disturbed emotions, we don't have to bring them with us as we have been our entire life.
Because those disturbances are what are hindering all of the things that you want in your life. Those are what are stopping you from getting them. It's not that you don't have a degree. It's not that you don't have a degree in what you wish you majored in. It's not that you didn't ever get that job. It's none of that. It's you that are holding yourself back from trying to get what it is that you want because of the stories that you're telling yourself that you don't have to believe. They don't have to be true. You can allow yourself to be as happy as you want to be.
It's crazy how we feel like the world is fighting against us when we're just fighting against ourselves.
And I'll say, we're at 52 minutes. I'm sure we'll edit a bit, but at 40 minutes, I was kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. But I said, hey, but why? This is good for you. It's good for you to get these things out, talk through these things. Like, don't avoid it. Don't just try to say, 10 more minutes left. Let's push through. Like, just stop. You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know. Like,
you never know.
You could have a beautiful moment, but you could miss it because you're trying to rush through to the next thing because you want to avoid what you're really feeling.
I definitely feel like this episode, like coming out of the weekend, and there's something interesting about recordings on a Monday after having a very engaged external weekend. It's definitely brought me back in, and it's definitely made me realize a lot of things I've been doing with the mind. So I can only hope it has the same impact on whoever's listening.
Yeah, always, right? That's what we're here for. We're going through our process for you all to listen. And the exciting thing is that if there's anything that you heard in this episode that you found really interesting and you're like, I want to hear more of that, I want you to go deeper, I have questions about that, that's where you can use our Thursday community series. It doesn't have to be a situation. You can say, hey, I want to hear more about that topic. I want you to go deeper on that topic, like really deep. Can you do that? So you can get really creative, right? The community series, it's for all of you. There's no rules or restrictions around it. We just want to help you get what you want. That's why we have you write in asking for what you want. So utilize that to however you want things to manifest. Just let us know.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Well, I think this was a great episode to record, and we hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. As always, keep a lookout for Thursday's episode. Write to us, email us, because I think the more that we can become aware of these habitual thought patterns, the more we can free ourselves, and the more that we can really, really, really find out what we're capable, find out who we really are, and see the beauty in this world, and despite a mind that tries so hard to constantly fight against us. So
it's true. So thanks for being here, y'all. And
y'all,
I know.
Texans.
It's so Texas.
It's more efficient to say
it's so much more efficient. As someone who used to have a stuttering disorder, it helps. So we love you all. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you this Thursday.
All right. Love you guys. Bye.